Got a 2012 Duramax LML here, like 200,000 miles or so. Came in with a blown head gasket, so we took the heads off, sent them to machine shop, got all new valves and valve seals, and I don't know if they changed the guides out or not, but they completely went through the heads, resurfaced them. We put ARP head studs on this thing and put it all back together, and since then the customer has been complaining that after idling when hot, and this is the only time it happens, you idle it when it's hot for like 5 minutes or more straight, and then you get on the throttle real hard, you see blue smoke coming out of the exhaust. And sure enough, it got here, and that's what would happen. You would see blue and sometimes a little bit of white, gray smoke, but mainly just blue smoke, which generally means oil. And we went ahead and we looked at the PIDs and the scanner for the fuel injector data, and according to the scanner, all the injectors were flowing within specs, but I still did an injector fuel return test on all 8, and it passed those. They all returned the exact same amount of fuel, and so I was wondering, you know, what's going to be causing this. We took the downpipe off the turbo, and the impeller was tight. You know, the bearings were good. There was no oil signs in the exhaust at the turbo. We pulled the intercooler pipes off just to make sure it wasn't any oil, maybe in the intercooler or through crankcase blow by that was getting back into the cylinders, and it made no difference. And this motor has no blow by. Like, you pull the oil cap off, and at least at idle is completely neutral. And this is where we were having the problem. So I didn't think it was anything to do with piston rings or something like that. And the guy, you know, he said it only happened after we did this job. So went ahead and pulled this bank, the exhaust manifold on this bank. And, you know, generally valve stem seals, if they leak, you're only going to have smoke upon cold start after it's been sitting overnight, because it takes a while. You know, the oil's sitting up there on top of the valves, and it will trickle down and get into the exhaust manifold, or you know, into the runner there, and then you go start it in the morning, and it, you know, burns that oil off. This one would not smoke at all after sitting overnight. You could let it sit for a couple days, go start it, immediately rev the shit out of it. Exactly, you know, no smoke at all. So this one's a little different, and which is why I didn't really think it was valve stem seals, but we had no other option. So I went ahead and pulled this manifold off, and sure enough, that's got to be what it is. Let me turn the light on here. So this one on the front, you can see there is, oh, damn it. See how, the camera doesn't really show it, but if you're wearing a headlamp and you're looking at that, there you go. You can see a little bit where it's like glistening. Now, valves require oil to lubricate the guides, or else you're going to seize up. But they don't require that much oil. The stem seals are designed to leak, but barely. I mean, you don't need much lubrication. And these heads have only been on for 2 weeks, and you can see that oil stain there. And then others, I mean, look at how much sludge there already has. These heads were going to be perfectly clean when they were installed. And you can tell it's wet on those exhaust valves. Now, why it only happens when it runs, I'm not sure. You know, diesels do not produce vacuum, so it's not like it's sucking it through an intake valve seal. Like a gas motor has vacuum on the intake side, diesels don't. This is very strange. So I'm hoping that the guides are not worn out. They're, you know, installed incorrectly, because then the heads got to come off. But hopefully we can change these seals in the truck. I believe we can. We'll see. So I decided to go ahead and pull the cab, because getting that driver's side lower valve cover off would be quite difficult in the truck. And I knew I was probably going to have to do both banks anyways, so it made the most sense to go ahead and pull the cab. And got this thing torn down. I'm looking at the valve seals, and I could tell nothing wrong. Like, it all looked good. Now I'm looking at the, you know, see if it has any excessive slop in the valve guides. And the service limit for the valve guide to valve stem clearance is 7.8 thousandths of an inch. Now, production specs are 2.8 thou. I forgot if that was intake or exhaust, but they were very close to one another. But yeah, service limit for both valves was 7.8 thousandths of an inch, which is quite large. And if I put my dial indicator on here, we only had maybe like, I think it was like 7 thousandths, but I was way out here measuring with it. So the actual slop on the actual valve guide is much lower. It feels tight. There's definitely nothing wrong there. And I'm looking at the seal, and the seal moves with the valve, so you can tell that it's hugging the valve. And I pulled, here's the seal that came off, and it fits nice and tight. Like, it's not loose at all. There's no visible damage to the seal. It's in good condition. And we're talking both intake and exhaust. I got the exhaust pulled here, and these are the intake valves on this cylinder. And I could tell nothing was wrong. So I'm second guessing myself, like, oh man, like maybe it's not valve seals. What if the rings are shot, What if we do have a turbo that's leaking? So I pulled the up pipe off the turbo. I was looking in there, and it's completely dry, and sitting here scratching my head, cannot figure this thing out. And I probably would have never figured this thing out if it weren't for Google. Went on the interweb, and there's a forum member here. So this guy, Roachwee, on the Duramax forum, he had the same problem about a year ago. It says, my valve stem oil seals are leaking, he thinks. No blow by, had heads machined. Valve stem seals installed at that time. And ever since, it's been using oil in the manifolds and up pipes now. So anyways, so he's thinking he's got valve seal issues. And come down here, that was my problem. So the same guy, that was my problem. And he's talking about an install tool where the valve seals on this motor, and this is the first time I've seen this, they're not meant to be installed all the way. And see, this guy gives this attachment here, which leads you to this technical service bulletin from All Data DIY. There's the bulletin number, and it's talking about how the early model Duramaxes use a different style seal, and they updated it for the LML and LGH, so in 2010. And this new valve seal is designed for the new valve guide. So here's the old valve guide. You can see it's got this ridge machine in there where the the valve seal just pops into that ridge. But the LML, like we have here, has a smooth face on the valve guide, and it's got a press fit valve stem seal, and it's not supposed to be installed all the way. It requires a special tool. They're talking, this is the tool they mentioned, but if you go to All Data for this specific year model, it's talking about the J44640. So that's going to be here on Freedom Racing. This is an OEM Kentmore tool, and you go down here, 2001 later, 6.6, used to install the valve stem seals to the correct depth. So if you go back to the forum, he's talking that when he installs them, they're supposed to be about an 1/8 inch. So there you go. That was my problem with the new installs, with the new tool. The seals are about an 1/8 inch from the valve stem seat. So he's talking about, he meant to say the valve spring seat. So that's this little metal washer here that protects the aluminum head for that spring. So it's supposed to be about an 1/8 inch between that washer and the bottom of the valve seal. And as you can see, these are pressed on all the way. That's what that special tool is designed to do. So I got the special tool coming, and yeah, I mean, that really sucks. Hopefully I save somebody else's ass. So anytime you're doing, you got the heads off, going to the machine shop, make sure they don't press those seals on too far. And here's the problem. Here's why it will not work if they're pressed on all the way. It's because you look at how tall the valve guide is here, and then how tall the seal is. This top face of the valve guide is going to be pressing onto the bottom lip of that seal, and it's going to distort the seal just enough to cause it to leak. So the seal itself, the rubber part, doesn't just stop at this metal ridge. It goes and continues about to where the end of my fingernail is. So like I said, you press that on all the way, now you are distorting the seal, and you're going to cause these oil consumption issues and the blue smoke that we were having. Here's a look through my bore scope at one of the intake valve guides. As you can see, we have oil stacked up here. We have sludge buildup over here, where the rest of the intake runners are completely, you know, brand new looking. Granted, this motor just had a head job done not long ago, so the rest of the intake runner looks like over here it's nice and shiny aluminum, but here we can see the buildup of sludge, and then we have this wet oil spot. And we go over here, that's the same valve. So here's one that's not leaking. As you can tell, everything's nice and clean and dry. And the rest of the intake runners, like I said, look like this nice bare aluminum. So that valve that I showed you earlier was definitely leaking oil, and that's the valve that I was showing you right here, is this exact valve, but the seal, as you saw, the seal was in perfect condition, just installed too far.